Hey everyone, welcome. I was a student of Greg Mankiw, and one thing I really took away from him is that economics doesn't have to be complicated. So today, we're going to tackle a topic that gets everyone talking and often pretty confused: taxes. We're going to peel back all the political layers and really look at the economic machinery running underneath it all. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll get the big picture. Then we'll dig into the hidden costs of taxes. After that, we'll ask what a fair tax even looks like. And finally, we'll get to the big one, the constant tug of war between efficiency and fairness. All right, let's jump right in. Whenever you hear politicians arguing about taxes, the first question you got to ask is, well, where does the government's money actually come from in the first place? Okay, so take a look at this. The federal government's money, where does it come from? You might be surprised. The lion's share, and I mean almost all of it, comes from you and me. You add up personal income taxes and those social insurance taxes, for Social Security, Medicare, and boom, that's over 85% of the total haul. Corporate income taxes? It's actually a pretty tiny sliver of the whole pie. But it's a totally different story when you zoom in on your state and local governments. They're playing a different game. Their single biggest chunk of cash, it actually comes from the federal government. And after that, they're leaning really heavily on things like property taxes on your house and the sales tax you pay every time you buy something. So we know where the money comes from. But what's the cost? And I'm not just talking about the check you write to the IRS. No, the real hidden cost of a tax is way more interesting. It's all about how it makes us act differently. Yeah, economists have a term for this, and it sounds kind of grim: deadweight loss. But think of it this way. It's a lose-lose situation created by a tax. It's when a buyer and a seller both want to make a deal that would make them both happier, but the tax gets in the way and the deal just doesn't happen. That potential value, it doesn't go to the government, it just evaporates. Poof, gone. It's pure waste. This little ice cream cake example is perfect for explaining it. So look, with no tax, everything's great. Sydney and Zaid both buy a cake, and together they get what we call $15 of total surplus, or you could just say happiness. Now, slap a $6 tax on it. Zaid still buys one, so the government gets its $6. But for Sydney, the new price is just too high. She walks away. And that $5 of happiness she would have gotten, it's just gone. It didn't go to the baker, it didn't go to the government. That's the deadweight loss, right there. And believe me, this isn't just some theory in a textbook. This quote? This is what deadweight loss sounds like in the real world. Someone wants to improve their property, make it nicer, right? But they know if they do, their tax bill will go up. So they just don't do it. The neighborhood doesn't get a better looking building, the owner doesn't get the extra value, and all because the tax created a bad incentive. Okay, so taxes can be inefficient. They can make us all a little bit poorer in ways we don't even see. So why have them? Well, we kind of need them, right? Roads, schools, defense, that stuff isn't free. And that leads us to maybe the toughest question of all. How on earth do you make taxes fair? When it comes to fairness, economists usually think about it in two big ways. First, there's the benefits principle. It's pretty straightforward. You pay based on the benefits you get. A perfect example is the gas tax. You drive on the roads, you buy more gas, you pay more tax to fix the roads. Makes sense, right? The other big idea, and this is the one that really dominates the conversation today, is the ability to pay principle. This one's all about levying taxes based on who can best shoulder the burden. And this ability to pay idea has two important parts. The first one is called vertical equity. All that means is that people with more money should pay more in taxes. Simple enough. The second is horizontal equity. This says that people in basically the same financial boat should pay about the same amount in taxes. Now, that sounds easy, but trust me, that's where things can get really complicated. So depending on how you think about vertical equity, you end up with three basic kinds of tax systems. You've got your progressive system, which is what we have for federal income tax in the US. The more you make, the higher your percentage tax rate. Then you've got a proportional tax, or what people call a flat tax. Everybody, rich or poor, pays the exact same rate. And finally, there's a regressive system. This one's a bit counterintuitive. Your tax rate actually goes down as your income goes up. Okay, but just when you think you've got it figured out, there's a twist. Who really pays a tax? Because I'll tell you, the person who physically sends the money to the government isn't always the one who's actually bearing the burden. Economists call this tax incidence, and it's super important. The fur coat example is the classic way to understand this. So imagine a government says, hey, let's tax the rich. We'll put a huge tax on luxury fur coats. On the surface, it sounds perfectly fair, right? It's hitting the wealthy. But what happens? Wealthy people have lots of options. They don't need a fur coat. They can just buy a fancy watch or a sports car instead. So what happens to the demand for fur coats? It tanks. And who gets hurt? The people who make and sell the coats, the factory workers, the salespeople, who probably aren't rich at all. The burden of the tax gets shifted away from the buyer and onto the seller. And this right here, this brings us to the core conflict, the big trade-off at the heart of every single tax policy debate. It's a constant battle between two goals: efficiency versus fairness. So, to really see this conflict in a crystal clear way, let's do a little thought experiment. Imagine a tax called a lump sum tax. It's simple. Every single person, no matter who you are or what you do, pays the exact same amount. Let's say it's $6,000 a year. A billionaire pays $6,000, and a student working part-time pays $6,000. Now, from a pure efficiency standpoint, this tax is, well, it's perfect. It is the most efficient tax imaginable. Why? Because it creates zero deadweight loss. Think about it. There's absolutely nothing you can do to change how much you owe. You can't work less, you can't buy less, nothing changes your tax bill. So it doesn't distort your incentives one bit. So that begs a pretty obvious question, right? If this tax is so perfectly efficient, why doesn't a single country in the world actually use it? Yeah, the answer is pretty simple, because it's profoundly, deeply unfair. It might be a 10 out of 10 for efficiency, but it's a 0 for fairness. It completely ignores that whole idea of vertical equity. I mean, asking a millionaire to pay $6,000 is a rounding error, but asking someone earning minimum wage to pay that same amount, that could be catastrophic. And this right here, this is the tug of war you see playing out in our politics all the time. That constant back and forth debate about tax rates for the highest earners. It's not just politics, it's a debate about this very trade-off. One side argues for lower rates, emphasizing efficiency and encouraging investment, shrinking that deadweight loss. The other side argues for higher rates, emphasizing fairness and the ability to pay. It's the same fundamental conflict, over and over again. All right, so let's boil it all down. What should you take away from all this? First, remember that designing a tax system is always a balancing act. It's about two competing goals: making it efficient by minimizing costs and making it equitable, or fair. Second, that hidden cost we talked about, deadweight loss, is real. And third, fairness isn't simple. And pretty much always, those two big goals, efficiency and fairness, are pulling in opposite directions. Which really leaves us with the one big question that never goes away. The question every society has to grapple with. We know a tax system can be efficient, or it can be fair. But can it ever, truly, be both? And if not, where do we draw that line? Thanks for digging into this with me today.